This bloody past suggests to us that enemies cease hostilities only when they are battered enough to acknowledge that there is no hope in victory, and thus that further resistance means only useless sacrifice.
All right, so today we're taking a deep dive into something pretty heavy, conflict.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, but specifically when enemies decide, like when they decide to stop fighting.
Okay, so like the end of a war or...
Yeah, like what makes people or countries, I guess, decide, okay, we're done. And we've got some really interesting thoughts on this from historian Victor Davis Hanson.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
Yeah, he's got this quote that we're going to kind of unpack today.
All right, let's hear it.
Okay, so Hanson says, and I'm quoting directly here, "This bloody past suggests to us that enemies cease hostilities only when they are battered enough to acknowledge that there is no hope in victory, and thus that further resistance means only useless sacrifice."
Okay, wow. So kind of a bleak view of history then, but
Yeah, it's definitely not sugarcoating anything.
no, not at all. But I mean, you think about a lot of the wars that we study, and there's definitely a truth to that, right? Like,
Yeah.
unfortunately, it often takes incredibly devastating losses, just this crushing weight of dwindling hope before one side is willing to even consider, like, okay, maybe we can't win this.
Yeah, and I think what really gets me in that quote is the phrase, useless sacrifice.
Yeah, that's powerful.
Like, is there ever really a point where sacrifice, especially in war, is truly useless? Like, is that just, I don't know, a matter of perspective?
I mean, that's a question that people have been wrestling with forever, right? Like philosophers, historians, people who've lived through these conflicts.
Right, exactly.
What might look like a futile last stand to one side could be seen as an incredibly heroic act of defiance by the other side.
Oh, totally.
Think about like, the trench warfare in World War I.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
Millions of soldiers died in these just brutal, often very stagnant battles where very little ground was actually gained. And from one perspective, you could look at that and say, well, that was just a horrific waste of life.
Right.
But for the people who were in those trenches, every inch that they held, every life that was lost, probably felt completely essential to them, to their cause, to their country.
It's so true how differently things can look depending on, what side you're on, like whose story you're hearing.
Absolutely, yeah.
And it makes you wonder, too, about Hanson's idea that peace often comes when one side just feels like they can't win, that they've lost all hope.
Right.
Does that mean that lasting peace can only happen when one side is just completely and utterly defeated?
Well, if that's the case, I mean, it brings up a lot of really tough questions, right? Like, is a peace that's built on that kind of foundation, is it really sustainable in the long run? Or is it, just setting the stage for more resentment and conflict later on?
Exactly. Like, is it just delaying the inevitable?
Right, exactly.
So I want to ask our listeners, think about a conflict, either something that's happening in the world right now or something from history where maybe you see Hanson's idea playing out.
Yeah.
A situation where one side seems to be getting to that point where they're like, okay, we might not achieve victory the way we thought we would.
Yeah, and even when that happens, the transition to peace is rarely easy.
Oh, absolutely.
There's often a lot of division within the countries involved. There might be political struggles, shifts in power.
Yeah.
And there's always that need to really address like the root causes of the conflict in the first place. Otherwise, even if you get a truce or some kind of agreement, it can be very, very fragile,
Yeah, it's like putting a Band-Aid on a much bigger problem.
Exactly, yeah. So even when the actual fighting stops, there's still so much work to do if you actually want to build a lasting peace. It's really a complex and delicate process.
Oh, it definitely is.
Yeah.
And this actually leads to like the final thought that I wanted to leave everyone with. Okay.
Yeah.
So if Hanson's idea is right, are we just stuck in this never-ending cycle of conflict and then maybe a fragile peace? Or are there other ways to get to that lasting peace that we haven't really figured out yet? Like, could there be ways to achieve peace without demanding that one side has to be, utterly crushed?
I think that's a really crucial question and one that deserves a lot more time, more attention, more thought.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Well, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive.
Yeah.
So much to think about, and we really appreciate you joining us for this conversation.
Absolutely. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Take care.
Bye.